Alright, hello you amazing people you. So this is your instructor, David Haywood, and I wanted to go through a few of the common issues that I've been seeing that students have been having. I've received a lot of emails and students have been having some issues with Excel. So, so I just want to walk you through what you need to do in order to correctly work with Excel spreadsheets in this class. So all of the Excel spreadsheets that you're going to need are on Canvas. I've posted them on Canvas. So if you log into your MyGiant account and then click on Canvas, you can access our course. And I have a bunch of courses this semester, but they're all laid out more or less the same way. So let me just show you what this would look like from the perspective of one of my online courses. And again, it's going to be pretty much the same, I think, for any of my other stats classes. So let's say that you are trying to watch lecture 1.2. Okay, so you can click on lecture 1.2, and there is a PDF file, right, that has notes that you can either download and use them on like a tablet or something to fill out the notes, or you can download them and then print them. But either way, notice that if I click on the name of the file, it'll just open up that file in Canvas, and I won't be able to edit the file. If I want to actually be able to edit the file, then I need to download it, which I can do by either clicking on download from this view, or I could have just clicked on the arrow next to the file name, and that will download the file. Okay, and now I can open it up here. Now, of course, this is going to look a little bit different on an Apple device, but it'll be similar, right? You download the thing, and then you can open up the file. And now you'll be able to make edits to it, or print it off, or whatever you need to do. This goes for assignments as well. So if you have an assignment that's been that is a PDF file, then you'll need to download it first, and then you can print it, right? Then you'll be able to print it. So that's the first thing. But now, as far as the Excel stuff is concerned, this file you don't need to worry about, okay, unless you need a screen reader or something, and then this might be a useful file for you. But otherwise, you won't need to worry about that file. This file is where the data is. And once again, if I only click on the name of the file, it'll just open that up in Canvas, which isn't useful if what I'm trying to do is, work with it in Excel. So I don't want to do that. I want to download the file. So I'm going to click on the arrow next to the name of the file. That will download the file, and then I can open this up in Excel. Now, when this opens up in Excel, for me, it will open up in the desktop version of Excel, and that's because I'm working on a real computer. I'm not working on a tablet or a Chromebook. And I have Excel downloaded onto my computer. If you're not working with a real computer, or if you are working with a real computer but it doesn't have Excel downloaded on it or installed on it, then you're not gonna. This is not going to open up in the desktop version of Excel, and it's going to look quite a bit different from this, and that's going to be a problem. Okay, let me just show you some of the ways that students have been accessing the Excel files that I don't want you to do, right? In ways that are not correct. So some of you might be opening them up on like an iPad or something, in which case Excel is going to look kind of like this. The iPad version of Excel and other tablet versions of Excel are useful. You can use them to do things, but they don't have all of the same features as the desktop version, and so it's not going to be sufficient. In particular, for problem set 1.3, you're going to run into some real issues when it comes to using this kind of tablet version. In fact, I think you have issues with pivot tables generally when you're trying to use a tablet version of Excel. So this will not do. As I've said, as I've announced, you simply, a tablet is simply not sufficient. Like, tablets are great tools for taking notes and stuff, and for doing some things on Excel, but by themselves they're not going to be sufficient for this class. You need a real computer, okay? You need a real computer. Now another way that students have been accessing their Excel files is by opening them up in Google Sheets. So this is what Google Sheets looks like. Now Google Sheets will work. You can do everything I'm going to show you how to do in this class in Excel. You can do those same things in Google Sheets. However, if you want to use Google Sheets instead of Excel, you're gonna have to do some of the work to figure out how to use it yourself. But I know that in Google Sheets you can do pivot tables and all that kind of stuff. So if you are kind of like not really comfortable with technology and not really comfortable kind of teaching yourself how to do things, I would not recommend using Google Sheets, because I don't have any step-by-step instructions for you on any of the Google Sheets stuff. You need to be using the desktop version of Excel so that you can follow along with the notes and the way that I show you how to do things in the notes. Now, if you are going to use Google Sheets, one of the issues that you'll have is you'll need to download these files when you're finished with them. And so to do that, you go to File, and then you can go to Download. And you have different ways that you can download it. You can download it as a CSV or a PDF. The way that you should download it is as a .xlsx, which should be the first option anyway. So if you download it using that file format, then you should be good. And then you just need to save it to some place on your computer where you can find it, so that when it comes time to submit the Excel workbook when you need to, you can find the file and do that. Now, some of the charts that you make in Google Sheets will mess up when you try to convert them, when Google Sheets tries to convert them to Excel when you go to download the file. And so this would be another reason not to use Google Sheets for this class, because some of your work might not transfer over from Google Sheets over to Excel in a perfectly seamless fashion. So once again, I wouldn't recommend this. I would just recommend using Excel, which is what I'm going to show you. So, okay, and then finally, one of the ways that students are opening up these files is they're opening up in the web app, right? So as students at COS, you have access to like web app versions of all of the Microsoft Office tools, like PowerPoint and Word and Excel. This version of Excel is the web app version of Excel. So what you're looking at here is the web app version of Excel. And unfortunately, it does not have all the same features as the desktop app. So this also will not be sufficient for you to get your work done. You need to have the actual full desktop version of Excel. You need to have a real computer, and you need to install Excel onto that computer if it is not already installed. The good news is that if you have a real computer, you can do this for free as a COS student. So I'll show you how to do that. But the moral of the story is it needs to be the full desktop version. It needs to be this version of Excel that you're working with. Okay, so it needs to look like this. One of the problems with the web app version is that when it comes time for you to submit your work, you can export the file, but you only have the option to export it as a .csv file. And the problem with that is CSVs will only download one sheet at a time. So like here's one sheet in this workbook, and here's a different sheet in the workbook, right? So, and you navigate to those by clicking on these tabs at the bottom of the workbook. So if you try to download this as a .csv, it's only going to do one sheet at a time, and so that's going to cause problems. But another issue with this is with pivot tables. You can insert pivot tables, but they don't have all the same features. And again, in particular, this is true of section 1.3 when we're trying to group into classes. If you're trying to do this on the web app version of Excel, which is what we're looking at here, you're going to have a really hard time figuring out how to group into classes. So this is not the way to do it either. So for those of you who have who don't have a real computer, you're trying to do this on a tablet or something, let me just say, once again, that's not going to work. You're going to need access to a real computer. If you don't have access to one, you can use the computers on campus at COS, but you're going to need access to a real computer in order to do the work in this class. A tablet will not be sufficient. If you do have a real computer, but it doesn't have Excel installed on it, here's what you do. Log into your MyGiant account. Don't go into Canvas, but from your MyGiant account, go into Office 365 and email. And if you have a real computer, not a Chromebook or a tablet, then you should have a little button in the upper right hand corner that says Install and More. So you're going to click on that, and then you're going to use this first option that says Install Microsoft 365 Apps. Now, where this next page takes you might depend on whether you have Office already installed on your computer, or what kind of computer you have. But you can go to View, Apps and Devices, and then you can click this red button that says Install Office, and you can see that's going to install Word, it's going to install Excel, PowerPoint, Notes, all kinds of good stuff. And this is the one that you want. You want Excel. But if you say Install Office, then it'll start to download like an installation wizard, and it'll take a few minutes for that to download, and then you open up the wizard and follow along on the prompts, and you'll get Excel installed onto your machine. And again, that's free for you as a student. Okay? Once you have a real computer with Excel installed on it, then when you go to download this data set, it will open up in the desktop version of Excel, and it'll look like this. So that's what you want to do. I will maybe walk you through some of the tasks in the problem sets. So if you were having trouble just kind of getting started in Excel, hopefully that answers some questions for you, and you can maybe stop watching the video at this point. If you would like help, so maybe you did have full access to the full desktop version of Excel all along, but you just had a hard time completing some of the tasks in problem sets 1.2 and 1.3. If that's you, then stay tuned and I'll walk you through some of those. So first of all, let's find problem set 1.2. So that'll be on Canvas, right? So we're gonna scroll down to problem set 1.2. I'll open that up. And it says, here's an Excel workbook containing several data sets. Download it, use it to complete the tasks described in the workbook. There are 5 tasks for you to complete. You'll see those tasks in the tabs at the bottom of the spreadsheet, and you need to complete all 5 tasks. So this was confusing for some students, but let's download it. Now, it shouldn't have been confusing for you if you had watched the lectures, because in the lectures we also have different data sets in different tabs, and so you would have known how to navigate between those different data sets. But some of you didn't watch the lectures apparently, and you had a hard time figuring out what tasks I was talking about. So notice, so I'm going to click on Enable Editing so that I can manipulate this. But notice that down at the bottom left of the screen you have all these different tabs. The first task is in the first tab, and the second one is in the next one, and so forth. And you need to complete all 5 tasks. Now, let me give you some advice. If you download this spreadsheet and then you just start working on it, you still have to save your work before you submit your assignment, okay? And so if I were you, I would just go ahead and save this file right now before I get started on anything, and I would rename the file. Because something that happens sometimes is that students will save multiple versions of a file, and then they get confused when it comes time to submit their work because they're not sure which file has their work saved on it and which file is the blank copy that they originally downloaded. And they end up submitting a blank copy, which obviously is bad. So let's go ahead and save the file now and rename it so that we know which one has our answers on it. So I'm going to go to File, and I'm going to go to Save As. And let's change this to problem set 1.2 dash answers, or something like that. And then I need to choose a location where I'm going to save this workbook so that I can find it later. A very convenient place would be to put it on your desktop. So that's where I'll put it. I'm just going to say browse, and then I'm just going to put it on the desktop on my machine and say save. So now if I close this file, and I should have an Excel workbook on my desktop called Problem Set 1.2-Answers, and I can double click that to open it up, and there it is. Okay, so now let's complete some of these tasks, right? This first one says the raw data to the left, show the type of cranberry sauce for 1,000, blah blah blah. Part A says to use a pivot table to create a frequency and relative frequency distribution for the data. Very well. We went over this in the notes. To insert a pivot table, you select the data, and then insert pivot table. I'm going to do it in the existing worksheet and place it right there. Drag type of cranberry sauce to rows and values, and this is the frequency distribution. I was also asked for a relative frequency distribution, so I'm going to repeat those steps. Insert pivot table. In the existing worksheet, let me put it right beneath the previous one. And I'm going to drag type of cranberry sauce to rows and values. Now I've got a second copy of that same frequency distribution, but this one I want to make into a relative frequency distribution, which means instead of displaying the counts, I want to display the percentages. To do that, I change count. I click on count and go to value field settings, show values as percent of grand total. And that's it for part A, right? I've got my frequency distribution on the top, my relative frequency distribution on the bottom. And then part B asks to create a frequency bar graph for the data. A frequency bar graph, so I'm going to use my frequency histogram, the top one, to make that bar graph. So to do that, I select that table, go to insert, and I'm going to insert a bar chart. And that's it. You know, from there you can customize things. I can get rid of that. I can make it bigger. Right? I could change the name of the graph. I can change colors. I can add labels. All kinds of stuff. Right? You just play around with this. You know, and just get familiar with it. But that's it for task 1. So what I would do in order to save my progress is I would just click on this little disk symbol up here. That's the save symbol. So if I click that, it'll save my progress, right? And so that way if I close this out, or if it crashes or something, when I reopen it, all of my progress has been saved for task 1. And I can move on to task 2. So let's see, this one says to do basically the same thing. It says create a relative frequency distribution. This time we're not asked for a frequency distribution, we only need a relative frequency, so this should go a little quicker. Insert a pivot table, right here in the existing worksheet. And drag that to rows and values, and we'll make these percentages. And now part B says create a relative frequency bar graph. Well, I'm going to use my relative frequency distribution to do that. I select it, insert a bar graph, and I'm done. Save, and on to task 3. So this is how this goes. I'm going to skip task 3. Task 4. Notice that in task 4 I do not have raw data. This is already a frequency distribution, and what part A asks me to do is to use a pivot table to create a relative frequency distribution. So, okay, I'm going to select the frequency distribution, insert a pivot table in the existing worksheet, and this time if I want to make a relative frequency distribution and I just drag favorite Pokemon to rows and values, it's not going to be correct, because all it's going to tell me is that Bulbasaur occurred once in this chart, right? The word Bulbasaur occurred once in the chart. I don't want it to be a 1 though, I want it to be a 37. I want the count to be here. So instead of dragging favorite Pokemon to values, I'm going to drag count to values. And there you go. Now I've got Bulbasaur 37, Charmander 35, all these numbers are matching. Now, this is just a frequency distribution though. I was asked to make a relative frequency distribution, so again, I'm going to go to value field settings and show values as % of grand total, and now it's a relative frequency distribution. Part B asks for a frequency bar graph. This is a relative frequency distribution, so I don't want to use this distribution for my bar graph. I want to use this distribution, which was my frequency distribution for the bar graph. So I select that, insert a bar graph onto task 5, right? And it's a good idea to just like save as you go, you know, so that you don't lose any of your work. This one asks for a similar thing, so I'll skip it, but it asks for to make a relative frequency distribution out of this, and then make a relative frequency bar graph. So on part B for task 5, you'll use your relative frequency distribution that you create with your pivot table to make a relative frequency bar graph. So just make sure that you're paying attention to whether you're asked for a frequency distribution, frequency bar graph, or a relative frequency distribution, relative frequency bar graph. The difference is that in a frequency distribution, you're listing off the count or the number of times something happened. With a relative frequency distribution, you list off the percentage of times that something happened. And that's that for problem set 1.2. I've already saved the changes, but I can press save again if I want. And then all of my answers are there. Now, well, not all of them, because I didn't complete the task, right? But let's say that I wanted to submit this now, because some of you are having trouble with this as well. So let me view this as a student so that I get your view of things. Okay, so from the student view, you're going to upload, and then here you can choose the file to upload. So if I just click here, then I can find where I put the file. Now, if you remember, I saved the file on my desktop. So I would go to the desktop, and there's my file. So I'm just going to double click that, and then it uploads that file, and I can say submit assignment. And that's that. It looks like it's going to try to upload a little preview for me. I'm not sure how long that'll take, or how long I want to sit here and watch it do that, but that's how that would work. So so that's it for problem set 1.2. Let's take a look at problem set 1.3 real quick. So you could get that from going to the home screen and looking at 1.3 in the week 1 module, or you could just find it here in the assignments tab. Once again, let me view this one as a student. Once again, you've got a workbook, you download it, use it to complete the tasks. It's saying for tasks 3 and 4, you're asked to construct 2 different pivot tables from the same data set. Now, some of you are having trouble with this, but notice that I've given you some hints to help you out here. It says if you use the same column for both pivot tables, the tables will be linked, so that when you change one, the other automatically changes, and this isn't what we want. There are a few different ways to get around this issue. Probably the easiest thing to do is to copy the data and paste it into another column. Then you can use the original column for one of the pivot tables and use the copy for the other one. And this way, the pivot tables will not be linked. So let me show you what I mean. So I'm going to download that problem set. We can open it up and take a look at some of these things. First of all, let's save the file, change the name of it. I'm going to save as problem set 1.3 answers, and let's put it on the desktop like we put the previous one. You don't have to put it on the desktop, by the way. You can put it wherever you like. Okay, so task 1 here says the data represent the number of goals scored by the home team in each FIFA World Cup match from 1930 to 2014. Use a pivot table to create a frequency distribution for the number of goals. Do not group into classes. Okay, so select the data, insert a pivot table right here in the existing worksheet. I'll drag goals scored to rows and to values. Now remember that with numerical data, there is one additional step when you're making a frequency distribution, and that is we need to change sum to count. So I'm going to go to value field settings, change sum to count. And that's it for part A. Part B wants a frequency histogram. Very well. We'll select the chart, and insert a bar chart, and I can get rid of the total, and I can make these bars wider. Don't forget to make the bars wider because a histogram shouldn't have any gaps, right? So make it like 3% or something. And there you go. Again, you can change the name of the graph or whatever. You can save your progress. You don't have to save as each time. In other words, don't go to File and Save As because that'll create a new file. You don't want a new file. You just want your existing file to save the work that you've done. So just click on that little save icon and on to the next task. We're asked here to use create a relative frequency distribution. Make sure to display the empty classes. Well, we can come back to that. I want to show you one where you were asked to do two different pivot tables. So like number 3 here. It says use a pivot table to create a frequency distribution, group into classes. Part A says to use a first class starting at 160 and a class with a 5, whereas Part B wants the first class to start at 160 and use a class with the 10. Sorry, it's 10 for Part A, 5 for Part B. Okay, well let's do that. So I'm going to select the data. I'm going to insert a pivot table right here in the existing worksheet. And we can drag height to rows and to values. With numerical data, I need to make sure to change sum to count. And so far so good, but now I need to group into classes. And this is where you're going to have real problems if you're trying to do this in the web app version of Excel, right? Because I don't think you can group into classes there. But if you have the desktop version, then you should be able to hover over one of the rows until it turns into a little black arrow like this. And you can click on the row and right click it and group. There are other ways to group too, but that's the way I do it. We were asked to start at 160, so I'm going to change 165 to 160. And for Part A, we want a class with the 10, which is what its setting is already, so that's good. I'll say OK. And there's our first pivot table. Now, if I try to insert a second pivot table from this same column, then I'm going to run into some issues, okay? Because you'll notice that it automatically uses the same classes as what I had before, because the issue is that these two pivot tables are linked. If I try to regroup in a different way, it's going to change both, right? If I try to make this a class with the 5, since that's what we were asked to do, it's going to make both of them have a class with the 5, which is not what we want. So this is very frustrating, and it's understanding that you might be frustrated by this. But again, I gave you a hint in the assignment description about how to deal with this situation. What you do is you just make a copy of the column, right? So I'm going to select the column and right-click it and copy. Then I'll select another column and say paste. So now I've got a second column to work with. Let me delete this. So you select the column and hit delete, not backspace, but delete on your keyboard, and that'll get rid of that pivot table. Let me insert another column too, just to have a little separation. Okay, so now this pivot table here is linked to this column. If I want to make another pivot table, I just need to use this other column to do it. So I'm going to select the data in that column and insert a pivot table. Let's put it right here. Say OK. And then I can do, you see, notice that they're not linked anymore, okay, which is good. I'll change sum to count, and then group into classes. And this time, let's use a class with a 5. And there you go, right? You get two separate pivot tables that are not linked anymore, because this pivot table is using the first column, and this pivot table is using its copy. So the pivot tables are no longer linked. Part B wants a histogram for both of these. Well, we just reviewed how to do that, so you select one, insert a pivot table, insert a bar chart, and then fix it up a little bit. Format data series, we can make the gap width like 3, and that's a nice looking histogram for the first one. Same for the second one. Insert, and then you fix it up, right? Get rid of this, make the bars wider, etc. I don't want to waste your time, but so you make the bars wider, and then you're good with task 3. You save, and then you're on to the next one. So I think task 4 is the same way. This time you want 3 pivot tables, so you want to make like 2 copies of this so that you have 3 columns in total, 1 for each pivot table you need to make. That should be it. I think that should solve most of the issues that you're having, if you're having issues with this sort of thing. Of course, once it's saved, then once you've completed all the tasks and saved, make sure to save your progress before you exit. And then you can upload your file, 1.3, and submit it, and that's it. That's that. So that hopefully clears up some of the issues that you're having. Whatever you do, don't stress out about this too much. Although you do need to get on this as soon as possible. I'll try to. Yeah, I'll extend due dates on some of these things. I'll let you resubmit if you made mistakes. If you've already submitted stuff and you want to resubmit, I'll let you do that. I just want to make sure that you know how to do all this stuff basically in Excel. So don't stress out about it, but definitely get this to me like soon, like yesterday, but with the corrections, right? So that's all I have to say, and hopefully that's helpful to you.